What's up everybody, I'm Trainboy1522 Productions and welcome back to another video. And in today's video, I'm going to show you my experience of my school trip to Chicago, Illinois. In this shot, you can see our charter bus pulling into the Navy Pier area. This would in fact be our first stop. As we pull in, you could see some of the great architecture that Chicago is most famous for, and that's our first stop for today. After getting off the bus, we took a boat tour through the city to check out the buildings with their architecture, design, and a bit of history of the city itself.
Number one is because we'll pass by where that log cabin was on our tour. Number two, because it's a great example of how this city has always been a city of immigrants right from the very beginning. Unless you're a Native American, everybody who lives here decided to come here from somewhere else. That's true my own personal story as well. My father originally from Greece. My mother, third generation, but her ancestors were originally from Ireland, right? But they met here in this great city. Now, as we go under the bridge, it kind of acts as a curtain as we head into the architecture. So if you have some cameras, if you want to get those out, now's a good time. You're going to get a great view of the architecture here.
Look at this, Jack. Yeah. Dude, look at these.
Anyway, why do you have that?
Guys, remember when Jordan? This is Chicago.
How about that view, huh?
How do you like Chicago?
Pretty good. Now we've got a lot to talk about when it comes to architecture here today. We're going to get started right away talking about this big blue wibbly wobbly building here on my right. That's a new addition to our skyline, just opened up last year. It's called the Saint Regis. It's the third tallest building in Chicago. On our tour here today, we're going to take a look at all three of the top tallest different styles of architecture. As you start to figure them out, you'll be able to point them out on your own, and then you'll also be able to figure out the time periods that all these different buildings came from. You'll be able to decode these buildings all on your own. Now, Trump International Hotel and Tower was designed by another superstar architect by the name of Adrian Smith. Now, Adrian Smith is famous for also designing the tallest building in the world, the Burj Khalifa in Dubai. If you want to get a sense of how tall that building is, take two Trump towers and stack them on top of each other. Now, Adrian Smith, born and raised right here in Chicago, so we don't have the tallest building in the world anymore here in Chicago, but we still raise the architects that go off and design them, right? So still a center for architecture here. Now, let's do a little compare and contrast. Let's look at that white building just next door. Taking a look at that, you guess that's an older building. How do you know? Material. The surface of that building covered with terracotta tile, very decorative details, clock tower up the center, all let you know that building is older. You'd be right, that building's about 100 years old, built in 1921. That's the Wrigley Building, which is a name you might hear all over town. So if you've heard of Wrigley Field or Wrigley Chewing Gum, that's all bubble gum money from the 1920s. Now that building is trying to look like a cathedral in Spain in there, which is now the House of Blues. It's basically an introvert's dream. You can live your whole life without getting out of your pajamas. So very popular for folks to live in multi-use buildings downtown and urban city centers today. But it took architects like Bertrand Goldberg to convince people to start doing that, right? And they call it Marina City because there's a place to park your yacht. I'm sure you guys just left your yachts at home tonight, right? That's why you're out here with us.
Oh, wow.
But you know, this was very surprising to have these boats down here on the river in the 1960s because this was a very polluted waterway back then. You would want to spend a lot of time on it. Take a look over here on your left. You can see that's all changed. We've added about a mile of new shoreline to Chicago. It's called our River Walk. It's a good example of a positive loop. As more folks come down to the river, the more interested they are in keeping the river clean. And as the river gets cleaner and cleaner, the more people come down and visit it. And you guys are some of those people. We're glad to have you, all right? Now, we'll talk more about the Riverwalk later. Next, I want you to take a look at this tall building here on our left. See that triangular shape up on the top? That's reminiscent of a Greek or Roman temple. That's called classical architecture, but this building from the 1990s, so we call it neoclassical. That's the name of that style of architecture. But I want you to see how this reflective glass works on the surface of the building. Look how the building across the way appears to sail across the front. It captures the sky, the weather conditions, the time of day. It's kind of surreal, almost as if you're looking right through the building, right? Part of the reason down the building, there's a split before it continues. That's because this side of the building was built in the 1920s, and that annex and roof were added in the 1980s. Now, as we come out from underneath the bridge, take a look at the similarities and differences in the two sections of the building. You'll see the section from the 80s doesn't exactly copy the older part of the building, but it is inspired by it. It's built with modern materials and in a modern technique, but respecting that architectural heritage in this building that stands between the 1920s and the 1980s. Now, once you're done taking a look over here, we're going to cut across the river to this big wide building here on your right. This is a style of architecture we're going to see a lot today on our tour. Let's look at some of the details so you can point it out. You can see it next time it comes across on the river. You'll see soaring vertical lines on the front, little setbacks on the top that draw your eyes up to the top of the building. It's a very optimistic style of architecture because of that, called Art Deco. That's from the late 1920s into the early 1930s.
Oh man,
and every time you see a building with that soaring vertical lines and setbacks on the top, you'll know it's from the Roaring 20s and it's that Art Deco style. Now, this building is the merchandise mart. This is where merchants would shop for goods for their stores back in the 1930s. If you take a look at these pillars out in front, they have busts of some prominent merchants you might know the names of: Marshall Fields, Montgomery Ward's, Filene's, to name a few. And if you're able to climb up onto one of those pillars and you push one of those heads back, a big hunk of candy comes out of the neck. That's a Pez joke. I guess just the teachers in the back of that. That's fine. Now, as we come underneath the bridge, eyes up, cameras out, as we head into Wolf Point. This is a 360-degree view of architecture. Most of the buildings you see here built in just the last few years. We've got the flotilla out right now. These are all sailboats that are going to spend the rest of the year out on the lake until the winter. But they call it Wolf. Well, Wolf Point's the name of the part of the river where the north and south branches meet the main branch, which is what we're riding on right now. And we're going to go on to all three of those branches on our tour here today. Now, where the points of the river meet, the building straight in front of us is called River Point. Makes sense, right? But because of the parabolic arches on the top and bottom of the building, some folks think it looks like a box you microwave Hot Pockets in, so they call it the Hot Pocket building. There is a reason for that. That parabolic arch that you see on the base is to make way for train lines. There's train lines that go underneath this building. And so those circular holes you see are exhaust fans for that train. Now, that train continues behind 150 North Riverside here that we're facing. You'll see that it has a setback on the back of the building, and then the city mandates a 30-foot setback from the river. So you'll see the base of this building
Would you trust that?
looks like a pencil standing on its point. That can be a little concerning given the height of that building, right?
Would you trust that?
Nothing to worry about, though. These are very structurally strong buildings. And we are going to talk today about how they build these really tall buildings here in this very windy city. The first way is, I don't know if you know this or not, but these tall buildings are built to sway in the wind. They will sway a number of inches in either direction to alleviate wind pressure on these buildings. Now, that's good for the building. It's not fun for the people inside. They'll get seasick in there, right? And so what they do, up inside this building, up near the top, you can't see it, but there's 160,000 gallons of water. And as that building sways, that water sloshes. So when the building goes one way, the water sloshes the other way, pulling the building back towards center. If it overcompensates, it sloshes again, pulling the building back towards center quicker. They're called inertial slosh dampeners, and that's the first of three techniques we're going to talk about today for building these really tall buildings here in this very windy city. Now, over here on your left, another new addition to the Skyline 2020 Bank of America building. This is another example of how we respect our architectural heritage. The building that was here before from the 1950s had wavy silver panels on the side of it. When they tore it down, they saved those panels. Take a look at your eye level. See the wavy silver panels at the base of the building? They're from the older building that was there before. They're just a decorative detail as a tip of the hat to the history of this space here on the river. Now, speaking of the history of architecture on the river, the next section we're coming into, we call our evolution of architecture. 5 buildings on the right side of the river that are built in chronological order so you can see how architecture has changed here in Chicago. Now, the one building we don't have that you've seen that would be good to think of first is the Wrigley building. That's what Chicago started off as looking like. Those revival style buildings that look like cathedrals, right? Then once we get into the late 20s into the early 30s, you see these soaring vertical lines, a bunch of setbacks at the top, like the merchandise mart. It's that optimistic argument against it. People start to get tired of these boxes that have nothing to do with the space that they're in. And so as tastes change, architecture changes along with it. And as we move into the 1980s, you'll see the next big building here on the right, covered with reflective glass. That reflective glass shows off the neighbors, right? The color of the glass very similar to the color of the river, and as the river curves, the building curves along with it. Why? It's trying to look good in context. Remember contextualism that we talked about earlier, thinking outside of the box with contextualism in the 80s. That's our evolution of architecture. Does that make sense? Did you guys follow that? Yeah? All right. Now, we used to not talk about this building here on the left until they added this artwork to the sides. Can anyone figure out what you're looking at there? Remember the Y shape of Wolf Point that we talked about earlier?
Dude,
that Y shape up at the top, this is a map of the river. That orange brick is this building, right? This is really helpful for anybody who gets lost, right? Jump in the water, swim over, figure out where you are.
what do you think of it?
Now, do we have any movie buffs on our tour? Anybody like movies? A lot of movies filmed here in Chicago. Ferris Bueller's Day Off, Blues Brothers.
I told you
guys might be more familiar with 2008, the Dark Knight movie. Remember? Christian Bale is Batman. At the beginning of the movie, Heath Ledger and the Joker's goons, they zip line across to the roof of Gotham Bank. That's it. That's Gotham Bank from the movie. It's actually our old post office. It was abandoned at the time of filming. You got to imagine the Joker was pretty upset when he opened up all those bags of money and he found mail, right? Now, speaking of superheroes, you know, any good superhero has a great origin story. And as we head down the south branch of the river here, we're going to do a turnaround so you can get a better view of the buildings as we come back up north. And as we head down there, I'm going to share with you guys the origin story of Chicago. It's a story in a couple of parts, and it tells the story of how we ended up with the city you see before you here today. Now, the first part of this story starts 150 years ago when there was a horrible disaster that happened here in Chicago that might have been the best thing that ever happened to our city. Nod your head for me, guys, if you've ever heard of the Great Chicago Fire. A few of you?
Yeah.
Now, like I said, 150 years ago, the Great Chicago Fire started October 8, 1871. It was an unseasonably warm evening, 9 o'clock at night, when a fire broke out not too far from where we are now, just off to the right. Don't bother trying to look for it, it burned down. It was just outside of Mrs. O'Leary's barn. Now, as the firemen tried to come into the call, they got lost on the way. And there were 30-mile-per-hour winds that night that pushed the flames across the city. When the firemen finally got there, they did their best, but they soon realized they were outmatched. So they hoped that the river would stop the flames. But remember, I told you this was a very polluted river. It was even worse in 1871. It was so polluted that the river literally caught fire. The fire jumped the river twice. And as these fires would burn inside of big warehouses, they would suck in air to feed the fire. And then that would create vortexes. So there were burning tornadoes inside of buildings that would shoot the flaming roofs off into other parts of the city and start new fires. The fire got completely out of control. It burned for days. All of downtown Chicago was destroyed. People lost everything. Now, all of that's true, but there is a myth about the cause of that fire. You might have heard this, right? The story goes that the cause of the fire was that Mrs. O'Leary's cow kicked over a lantern. and burn down Chicago. Think about that for a minute. If a small fire breaks out in someone's garage, should the whole city burn down? No, right? What's going on there? Let's think about it. 1871, Mrs. O'Leary's cow, poor immigrant woman's animal. Do you think they were looking for somebody to blame? Looking for a escape cow, right? Would you like to know the real cause of the Great Chicago Fire?
Yes.
All right, since you want to know, I'll tell you. Okay. So remember I told you, city starts off 1837, 4,000 people. It's important to know these numbers. You'll see why. Okay? The fire 1871, that's about 30 years later. So you could see both of those events, the founding of the city and the fire. Here's what you need to know in 1871. There are 300,000 people living in Chicago. Imagine during your lifetime, your city grows from 4,000 to 300,000. This is the fastest growing city in the world at that time, and no one knows quite how to build it. What's here before everybody shows up? Woods. So what are the buildings made out of? Wood. What are the streets made out of? Wood. What are the sidewalks made out of? Wood. And if you want to open up a lumber yard next to a turpentine factory across the street from an orphanage, go ahead. There's no zoning laws. You can see the problem there, right? So when there is a drought all summer long, followed by the fall where the trees spread leaves is kindling all over this city, when a small fire breaks out, the whole place burns, right? That's not some cow's fault. That's bad city planning. But like I told you, probably the best thing that ever happened to Chicago. Because a certain type of person comes here after the fire, a person with plans. You see, architects descend on Chicago and they start to rebuild before the ground's even cooled off. Remember I told you at the time of the fire, 300,000 people living here? Less than 10 years later, 1880, there are 500,000 people living in Chicago. We come back stronger after that fire. One of these architects says in 1885, maybe wood's not the best building material, right? Maybe we should try something else. What if we put a steel structure inside that building? We can build taller that way. They invent the world's first skyscraper right here in Chicago, arguably a direct result of that fire. So guys, we wouldn't have a tour to show you here today if it wasn't for that fire. We wouldn't be spending this quality time together, right? And wouldn't that be the real tragedy? I think so. So that's the first part of the story. How Chicago comes back stronger after the fire. So what do you do after you just rebuilt your whole city? Well, you have the biggest party in the world. In 1893, Chicago wins the rights for the World's Fair. What that means is millions of people from around the world are going to come here to show off the new innovations and inventions of the day. What that means for Chicago is we've got to build 200 buildings to host the fair in 7 months. That's a tall order, right? So they go to the prominent architect of the day, man by the name of Daniel Burnham. And he gets all his architects together and he goes, okay guys, here's our plan for building this fair. I got a 3-step plan. First of all, no new styles of architecture. Remember I told you about these revival styles? It's a design solution. You get the job done a lot quicker if you're just copying and pasting buildings that had come before. Next he says, we're not going to have any arguments about the color scheme. If this blue looks good with gold, we're just painting everything white. They called it the White City. Imagine 200 of these revival classical style buildings sitting on the banks of Lake Michigan, gleaming in the Midwest sun. It was beautiful. But here's the last part. He says, we're not going to be able to carve these buildings out of stone. Let's just make the front of them out of plaster. I don't know if you know anything about plaster as a building. You've got to go to Chicago. You won't believe what they're doing there. You've got to see this city. And we become a world-class city overnight. We're a world-class city to this day. That's what Daniel Burnham believed. It's easy to say, but how do you do it? Well, the motto here in Chicago had always been Urbs in Horto. It means city in a garden. And so what he does is he designs public parks for all over the city. We have over 600 public parks here in Chicago. The idea being you go from anywhere you live in this big city to a natural space and be inspired by the beauty of nature. Then he also has this motto. He says, make no small plans. So he puts things on this plan in 1909 that he knows he won't be able to get to during his lifetime. But there are things that we have built since. So if you've been to our museum campus, if you've seen Buckingham Fountain, if you've visited our lakefront, gone to Navy Pier, remember that Riverwalk, which we didn't get around to until the early 2000s? It's on the 1909 plan for Chicago. So that's the third part of the story, see? We're a city that comes back stronger after the fire, a world-class city after the fair, but it's with beauty as a guiding star that you end up with the city you see before you here today. That's the origin story of Chicago. Now, I know you guys are probably taking a look at some of these buildings we've passed on the way down. This one right here might look familiar. Remember Marina City, 1960s, live your whole life in your pajamas? Same guy, 20 years later, designs River City. Same idea, place to park your yacht and everything, right? The big breakthrough here is back in the 1980s. Nobody lived on this part of the river. Look around. You see the more recently built residential buildings all popping up around it? Remember, Bertrand Goldberg, social scientist, changing where people lived. Seems like he's doing a pretty good job, right? Now, as we head back in towards the city, straight in front of us we have the king and queen of the Chicago skyline. That tall, dark, and handsome fella, that's the tallest building in Chicago. We'll come back to that one. In front of that, this building with a cylinder on top. Looks like a queen's crown. But we do better than a queen here in Chicago. We do better than a king. We have a goddess as part of our skyline. Take a look at that silver statue. You guys see that silver statue in the back? You guys making that out on top of that building? Nod your head for me if you see the silver statue. You guys see it? That statue is on top of a building with soaring vertical lines and setbacks. Tells you when it's from. It's that Art Deco style, 1930s. That statue is a 1930s, 30-foot tall statue of Ceres, the Roman goddess of agriculture. Now that begs a question. Why are we building statues to Roman goddesses in Chicago in the 1930s? Well, remember, this is the heartland of the USA, and all the farms around here are bringing their goods into Chicago to be bought and sold at our stock exchange. You want the blessing of the goddess of agriculture over your board of trade. Cereal, that's where the word cereal or cerveza comes from, right? Cereal. Now, cutting back over to the Queen, this building in front of us here from the 1990s, those cylinders on the top of the building, they light up at night. And as a matter of fact, they were so bright when the building first opened, it was confusing migratory birds. They thought it was the moon and they were getting lost at night. So now they dimmed the lights on that building during migration season. Now behind that one we have the undisputed king of the Chicago skyline, the tallest building here in Chicago. I am of course talking about the magnificent Sears Tower. It's also the magnificent Willis Tower. We'll talk about the confusion with the name here in just a second. Now, the Sears Tower is the tallest building in Chicago. However, it was the tallest building in the world when it first opened in 1974, and it held on to that title for over 20 years. That is a long time to hold on to that title, and the way that it did it is our second technique for building really tall buildings here in the Windy City. You see, the Sears Tower is actually 9 towers bundled together. If you can see it from above, it's on a 3x3 grid, and each of the spots on that grid has its own tower. Only 2 of those towers go all the way up to the top of the building. All of those smaller towers add support to the taller towers. That's the big breakthrough. It's frustratingly simple. Bundling. That's how they were able to build so tall. That's why they were able to hold on to that title for so long, and it's still the standard to this day. The tallest building in the world, the Burj Khalifa in Dubai, also uses this same bundling technique. Now let's talk about the confusion with the name. When the building first opened in 1974, it was built by Sears Roebuck Department Stores. So they called it Sears Tower for you younger folks. Department stores are these places where you have to leave your house to shop. I know it's not so popular today. Sure enough, Sears is no longer in the building. Company by the name of Willis has rented out a few floors, and they also lease the naming rights. So if you look at a map of Chicago, it'll say Willis Tower. But if you ask folks from Chicago, we're a little nostalgic, we're a little stubborn, we keep calling it Sears. I know it's confusing. Simple explanation. See, it's spelled Willis, it's pronounced Sears. It's as simple as that. All right. It's 452 feet from the first open air entrance up to the roof. That does not include the the antennas. The antennas are not spires. Spires are included in the height of a building. Antennas are not. As we pass by these 2 buildings here on the right, you're going to get a great view of the Sears Tower from the base. If you want to get your cameras out and take a shot of that, now's a good time for it. You folks here in the front are getting that view right now. You'll be able to see those different heights of the different towers. Now, even though the antennas are not included in the height of the building, they're still pretty big. They're about 300 feet tall. Now, you know, I've said over and over again, this is a windy city here in Chicago. That's one of our nicknames. I don't know if you know that. We are a very windy city. The wind blows across the lake. It funnels down the river, and then we pump it right into your seats. You guys getting the wind today? A little bit? Good. But that's not where the nickname came from. The nickname came from that 1893 World's Fair. Other cities were competing for the fair, and they accused us of exaggerating. They called us the Windy City of Chicago. That's where the nickname came from. We don't mind. We took it as one of our nicknames. We've got a lot of nicknames. Second City is another one. We used to be second biggest in population here in the United States. We're now third, but this is also the second city we rebuilt after the fire. Some other ones are City of Big Shoulders, City That Works. We're a very hardworking blue-collar town here in Chicago. Sometimes they call us Chi-Town for short. Shiberia when it gets real cold. But what about the name Chicago? Where does the word Chicago come from? Well, we have the Native Americans again to thank for that. The Potawatomi living around here. Remember, this used to be a much smaller river, just 4 feet wide, swampland all around here. And there were onions that grew along the shores of the river. And the onions stunk. So the Potawatomi had a name for those onions. They called them Chicagowe, and that became the name for the whole region. So that's why New York is the Big Apple, and Chicago, we're the stinky onion. That's what our name means. I'm not kidding you. And we'll put onions on almost anything here in Chicago. We're a big food town here. If you're able to get some food while you're in town, I'll give you guys some tips on some good food to try. I don't know if you ever heard of Garrett's. They have the unofficial Chicago mix of popcorn. Chicago people will stand on the street and wait in any kind of weather to buy popcorn. The unofficial Chicago mix is caramel corn and cheddar cheese. If you haven't tried it, it's pretty good. They have it at Navy Pier. Just make sure you bring some napkins. It's surprisingly messy. And we don't shy away from messy food either here in Chicago. If you've heard about our Italian beef sandwiches, very thinly sliced beef. They cook it in this juice, and so when you order it, they take tongs, pull the meat out of the juice, serve it to you on a hard roll. You can have it dry as is, or wet, which is where they take the whole sandwich and submerge it in that juice. Then they wrap it in aluminum foil, give it to you. Oftentimes there's not even a place to sit down in these restaurants, just a counter where you unwrap your sandwich, you put your elbows up, and then you gotta lean back so it doesn't get all over your shirt as you push the sandwich in your mouth. That's how you eat the Italian beef. Speaking of Italian food, you might have heard about our deep dish pizza. If you ask anybody from Italy, they won't know what you're talking about because we invented that right here in Chicago. There's lots of different styles. Giordano's, Gino's East, Pizzeria Uno. My personal favorite is called Lou Malnati's. Does anybody like sausage on their pizzas? How about a whole hubcap of sausage? Wall to wall, the whole top of that pizza covered with sausage at Lou Malnati's. If that sounds good to you, they have one in the base of the Wrigley building that we saw earlier. You can get yourself a slice of Lou's there. But I've saved my favorite Chicago food for last. We take this very seriously here in Chicago. The Chicago-style hot dog. You got it. How's that tasting? Pretty good? All right. Chicago-style hot dog here was invented in an area called Maxwell Street, which is a Jewish neighborhood. And so the hot dog is always all beef. They keep it kosher, no pork in our hot dogs. And just like a bagel with poppy seeds on it, the Chicago-style hot dogs has poppy seeds on the bun. So if you unwrap your dog, you don't see little black dots, you don't want it, just walk right out. And like I told you, Chicago is a city in a garden. Well, a Chicago-style hot dog, we call it drug through the garden. What does that mean? It has onions, tomato, relish, pickle spear, sport peppers, celery, salt, and mustard. There's only one thing we don't put on a Chicago-style hot dog, and that's you will catch hands if you ask for ketchup on a Chicago-style hot dog here in Chicago. All right, so skip it. Don't do it while you're in town. Now, as we come back towards Wolf Point here, Lake Street, you know, all these bridges move, and Lake Street is a double-decker, double-leaf bridge. That means it opens up on both sides. Bottom deck is for cars and pedestrians. The top deck is for our elevated train cars. Part of our public transportation system, the CTA, we called those the L for short. All right, fun fact about your guide Spiro, that's me, lifelong resident of Chicago. I have never had a driver's license. I can get anywhere I need to go in my city on the CTA, and it's only gotten better and better during my lifetime. You guys having a good time?
Yeah.
No.
You look like you're having a great time, I gotta tell you.
I am.
I'm
You
dying.
look like you're having a lot of
Of
fun.
hypothermia.
Now over here on our left, you see the Ridley building here. We saw that one earlier. Across the way, if you had to guess what style that is, looks like a cathedral, right? It's that revival style from the 1920s. That building is Tribune Tower. That used to be where they published the Chicago Tribune newspaper. Again, for you younger folks, newspapers were this thing where you used to have to pay for yesterday's news. It was weird. But Tribune Tower, now high-end condominiums. Remember, this one is in the Spanish Revival style. Tribune Tower is trying to look like a French Gothic cathedral, so they call that the French Gothic Revival style. And it's an interesting corner here in Chicago. We've got these buildings that look like cathedrals. And then if you look at this glass-walled building here just past the bridge, that's a little temple to technology. That's the Apple Store. You can see the little Apple on there. The roof looks like an iPad floating in space, right? How about another I Spy? You guys did so well with that last time. Can anyone find a peacock? Where's the peacock on the skyline? If you see it, point at it. Somebody in the back got it. We got 2 people. 3, 4, 5, 6. There it is, yeah, Nbc Tower, right? Now, Nbc Tower, soaring vertical lines on the surface setbacks, you think that's from the 1930s. It's not. It was built in the 1980s, trying to look like Art Deco styles. So we don't call that Art Deco. When you're copying Art Deco, you're not from the 1930s, that's called Eco Deco. That's the name of that style of architecture. I'm not kidding.
Oh, look, it's so tall.
Now, coming up here, between Fidelity Investment and University of Chicago, you'll see a black building with white antennas on the top. That's a very famous building here in Chicago. We don't get very close to it, but that's the John Hancock building. It used to be the tallest building in Chicago, 5th tallest now. I pointed out because it has an observation deck. You can head on up there, get beautiful views of the city. However, you have to pay for them. Now there's a restaurant right below the observation deck. It's called the Signature Room. If you head on up there, you get the same views for free, right? Take the money you save, buy yourself a soft drink, and get the same views. Tell them your old pal Spiro sent you. That's me. They won't know what you're talking about, but try it. All right. All right, guys. Next, we're going to take a look at this brown building here with the white stripe on it. You see it? We don't care about it. Look at the one behind it. That's what we're here to see. See that building with those wavy lines all across the surface? That's Aqua Tower from 2009. Now those wavy lines are patios. They're offset so people in the building can talk to their neighbors up and down the building, but they also kind of look like water, right? Called Aqua Tower because it's near the lake and the river. And it was designed by a superstar architect that I know you've all heard of. Jeannie Kane. Remember her? We talked about her earlier. She's the one that designed the Saint Regis. Remember I told you I was going to tell you more about the Saint Regis? I also told you I was going to tell you 3 techniques for building really tall buildings in a very windy city. Well, it turns out the Saint Regis has all 3, so let's review. Up in that tallest tower, there's hundreds of thousands of gallons of water as that building sways in the wind. The water sloshes, pulling the building back towards center. It's those inertial slosh dampeners that we talked about earlier. Then, remember with the Sears Tower, we talked about that bundling, all of those smaller towers, adding support to the taller towers. Look at the 4 stair steps in the St. Regis. Each of those smaller towers adding support to that tallest tower. But here's the 3rd technique. Here's the one we haven't talked about yet. Take a look at the 83rd and 84th floor of the building. In a little bit of fog right now, but you can still make it out. Remember before how we could see right through it? That's because there's no walls, there's no windows. Those are blow-through floors. You want to alleviate some wind pressure on the outside of a building, you just let the wind blow right through. It was a design solution that they added, but it's also very expensive. Recently, 2 floors of this building sold for $18.5 million. And you can't sell floors of a building that aren't there, right? Like those blow-through floors. But that's what you have to do if you want to build these really tall buildings in a very windy city.
After the boat tour, we went to Navy Pier to go get some lunch and also get some merchandise. I'm sorry I didn't clip anything there. It's because there was not much interesting stuff to record on camera. After Navy Pier, we went to Lincoln Park Zoo to go see some animals.
Push recording? Oh, well, it's on tape now, so whatever I say, you can hear in the video.
Yeah!
It's like that one Lyndon B. Johnson speech where he's just like, take a picture of, you're gonna catch me doing something I regret later. I mean, like me picking my nose or something like that.
Yeah.
Rover! Oh, it's gone! No! Life on the water. It's a duck!
Come on, let's take a picture of the duck.
Yes, sir.
Take
Duckies.
a picture of all three.
Ducks? Ducks?
You know what reminds me of? The duck sound effect meme.
When you did that, though. Did that. No, someone has one. SpongeBob popsicle. I think it's oh my gosh, they got duck food. Oh my gosh. Dumb thing. You're really expecting to read all. I know. I always go spend 30 minutes at each station.
Brother, approach. Oh, they're coming. They're coming over.
I don't want to get any trouble. Hate you. Hey, I'm known for my. I hope there's okay, what's there we go?
No. No.
You want to jump?
Bro, we're supposed to stay close.
Look, guys, when the doctor asks you what you want your baby to look like, it must be right here. So it is. Think like how maybe you have a reference photo? Yeah, here
Come on now.
I can't see it's too short.
It's a good riff.
Oh, look, there's one in there.
Oh my God.
There's one in there. There's three.
Take a picture of mom.
You did like, oh, hey guys.
Hey, buddy.
There's one.
Hi.
You should go in there.
No, I get killed.
Yeah.
There's one back there behind that tree. Are you getting that one? Yeah, this one. Monkeys are my favorite animal.
Dawn, you better go in. How would you go in there?
As a monkey. I don't know how I would go in there.
It looks like he's scratching his back.
He's eating ticks off of them. They're eating each other.
Coming. The flamingos, but I don't see them out. They're probably in danger. They're probably.
Where are the birds? I need your belly
He's up there. You ain't gonna get a good view. Oh wait, right here you can get his face.
all the way down.
Here, I'm taller.
Yeah, you don't have to bully me.
Yo, what's up, kitty?
I don't know. What is it? That's not my good side. Magic man.
Hey, he's just trying to have more
Didn't we learn like about replicators like Tuesday?
Smell?
Yo, Cameron, you filming this?
Yo, when can we expect this to be uploaded? Tonight? No. Tomorrow? I have no
What is that thing?
It's a monkey.
No. That is not a monkey. Where's he at? Oh!
Supposedly it says there's it's a little monkey.
What's that little guy?
What is it?
Oh, you came prepared for this, didn't you? You came prepared, didn't
Taste the banana. What are you eating?
Yeah, he's ready for a picture.
Why don't you go in there?
This one likes this tree.
Camera, look at this.
You like the tree?
What's your skill right here? Look at that. Oh my god.
Don't do that. You
Turn on the flashlight maybe.
Sorry, what do you put you like this close?
Let's see. Ooh.
Yes. Am I getting paid?
Yo, Cameron.
Yeah. Nice.
Does it look like a good picture?
Look at these.
I like the gibbons. They're cute.
Ooh.
Why is everyone gathering around?
That one was. Excuse me.
He ain't having no time about it.
Harambe. I know you're in there.
That's the one that we gotta get it so
They didn't kill
close.
Harambe.
Nah. Harambe's a legend.
Yeah.
Bro, like he likes to press.
He is the
Looks
press.
like he's sand, doesn't he?
What?
Oh, look at that one.
Look at this.
Take a monkey.
Where's the monkey? Wow. That's beautiful. That's beautiful. Bro, look at that. Oh my god. It's a crown lemur, so it's like.
Get the one in the back looks so sick.
Dude, we got one. The last monkey that we had came up to here.
It's just in there watching.
What an experience.
Yes.
I'm gonna get my phone out. Yo.
Guys, we should go through there.
Secret group?
Question mark?
Yeah, it's like a roundabout.
Hey.
Wait, do it again.
Hi.
Wait, is the gift shop on the other side?
nameless Phelps. I bet you'd love that for a pet, wouldn't you? That kitty? Yeah, that big kitty.
Big owl.
What shop here? It's a seagull. Oh, there's a shop here? Yes,
Yeah, there's a gift
it's
shop.
over there. See?
And we circle back around. Yeah, you can go under.
Oh!
Here we are. Here, let's go around. Come in. See him underneath.
Ow!
Go underneath.
Oh,
Let's do it.
Come on.
Oh wow.
Oh, it's tagged. It's tagged. Well, it just gave this one more. Yeah.
Yeah, I just missed it.
Oh,
There it is. I know exactly where he's going.
gone. Oh, he's back.
Look at that.
You're so big. I want you to stop. There's water. I'm scared of that, man.
This is like thick glass.
Start getting my glasses.
I think that's great.
I feel like I put my GoPro in the room. I feel like I've been putting my GoPro in
down
here.
here.
Here he is.
Come on, get him.
There it is.
What you trying to do, Chief?
You know, since they pee and poop in the water stinks so bad.
Yeah, exactly. Nobody is going to be stinking.
Why?
Oh, yeah.
Look at them.
Here, you can get better.
Man, wait for it. They're playing with that thing there. Get him. Right there. That's the one. Get him. Get him again. Oh. They're so cute. They're so dangerous. Yeah, there you go. No, they're just sea leopards. They're sea leopards.
Jump in.
He's awful fast with his arms.
What would you do if you walked through the picture?
Can you get on it? Like a little seat. Oh, there's a floater on it? Yeah. Look at the buoy. That's where he is.
Oh, look at there.
Oh, Bill. It's a big Wait, what? That one from the rock.
Look at there.
There's one up there and his mom, I think. See? Dude, look, Cameron, there's a baby one up there with his mom.
Yeah. Yeah, look at that.
Hey, it's a whole bunch of Diego's. Damien's.
Yeah, because they couldn't come. Bro, imagine not being able to come.
Awesome.
Imagine not being able to come to 8th grade class trip.
That's sad. That would be sad.
Dude, bro, oh, bro, they're trying to chase. They're fighting each other.
These are Red Bull Hancock.
Yeah.
No, I want to right in front of your face.
Oh my god, dude, bro.
Oh, I did.
Oh, it is a dog.
I think I have a dog back.
Can I smell it? Smells. Bro, just wait until the man comes up and just decides to
Dude, what if it went in there? It's such good quality.
Big chongas.
Dude.
He's looking at us.
But we left the crew.
They're coming.
Look.
I told you guys that we're not supposed to run. He's gotta be a song.
Bless you. They must be inside. Dang. They're inside. Where are the giraffes? Have indoor habitats and outdoor habitats. So I bet you if we go inside.
Look at this. Yeah, man, you should get waffle with it. Get the store. A couple flamingos. You ready? And look at down here.
Whoa, what if they got out? We have to decide.
Oh, hey, get those. I'm scared now. That black bird is watching me. Not racially motivated.
We all had dogs my dad.
So it'll be smaller.
I want to go here.
No. Guys, look down under the water.
Yeah, he's gonna be somewhere.
Look at this.
Or he's gonna be over there. Hey,
Look down. See him underneath?
Oh, look at that.
Oh, I see it.
If you look up, his head's right back against the rocks. He blends in. Here, I'll move out of your way. Please look underneath and straight down.
What are these?
Hey, let's head back to some
They look like big bees.
Bro, this is so trippy. It looks like blossoms back there. Dang, bro, that's...
Alan Smith might be here. I don't see it.
It's up my guy.
It's not good.
Yeah.
Look at that.
Look.
Look at the Americans. Oh, wow. Armando. Armando.
Someone's on the wall.
I think those might be the children or something.
I'm a giraffe whisperer.
Don't speak to Yo, if you're done recording, move. Bro, that's a camera.
Where?
Over here.
There under the rock.
Right there.
Snakes.
Oh, God. Snakes.
Where are the snakes at?
I don't know. Go.
One in the water. There's four. There's four of these guys. 1, 2, 3, and 4. Over here.
What are
Look at
they?
this.
What are these?
Snakes.
Move.
Cameron,
Miss
there's a
Phelps.
rattlesnake over here.
Miss Phelps.
Ooh, get that. That's a.
Miss Phelps.
That's a big one.
It's either a python or a.
That has a big nose.
Every snake does. Yeah, 3 of them. Oh, it's a white
Miss
rhino.
Phelps.
It's a white
Miss Phelps,
rhino.
you come over here.
Oh, right there. West African jaboon.
There's a, if you come over here, I give you
Somewhere right there. In their big pond thing.
Green vipers, oh yeah, how about them?
These guys are a lot bigger than the ones that was in my house. He's eating fruit.
Is that out?
Poor man's probably cold. Oh no, he's hiding. Oh, maybe he just wants to play. Oh, he just. Oh, he's so cute. He's so cute and friendly. He just wants to play. Where'd you go, buddy?
He's right there.
Where? He's so cute and friendly. He just wants to play. Right there. He just wants to play.
Oh, he's so cute.
Yeah, he's coming over. He's a really in playful mood for stuff right now. He doesn't like us.
He went this way.
Oh no, he's hiding. He doesn't like bro, he found that show. Apparently he's really good at doing stuff.
He's playing with us.
It's just staring at us. Oh, it's so cute. It's so cute. Oh, it's so cute. It's just watching us. He just wants to play right now. It's so cute and fluffy. It's so cute. You wanna? Yep.
And with that, we conclude our trip to Chicago and head back home. Thanks for watching this video, and I'd really appreciate it if you could click subscribe and click the bell for notifications so you won't miss a video from me. I'd also like to thank my school for making this trip possible. Anyways, thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.